Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Extender demo. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rod O'Connor, and I'm a product specialist here at E1 Solutions, and I will be presenting today's session. I have a couple of PowerPoint slides to get through, but today is mostly demo, so if you'll bear with me through a couple of slides, we will dig right into the software and what exactly it does. So what exactly is Extender? Extender is, as it sounds, it allows you to extend what GP can do for you, Dynamics GP. For example, you can build new screens into Dynamics GP, either attached to existing screens or standalone screens all on their own. I can store data that currently doesn't have a location in GP. So basically, if the user-defined fields in any given record in GP is not enough for you, we can give you an unlimited number of spaces to store that data. Okay, we can report on that data using SmartList Report Writer, or we can actually put that data into SQL View so you can use it anywhere where SQL can be consumed. So Power BI, Excel, SSRS, fill your boots, wherever you want to put that data, it is available to be put. With our enterprise version of the product, you can actually add logic to GP, and that's not just logic to custom windows that you can build an Extender. That's custom logic to any window in GP. Okay, and that's huge. And when we say any window in GP throughout this entire demo, what we're talking about is any product that is built on Dexterity, which is GP's programming language. That means about 99% of the ISV add-ons that you probably work with today, the Macormas and so on and so forth of the world, you can actually add Extender data and Extender logic to those windows as well. Okay. So a couple quick things to chat about before we dive into the demo is the difference between a window and a form. Okay, so an Extender window gets attached to an existing Dynamics GP window. And what that means is, let's say I want to add some, extra fields to my inventory window. I can do that. So I use an Extender window to expose those fields to my users, and we'll see some examples of that throughout this demo. An Extender form is completely standalone. So basically what that means is if I have something new that I want to maintain, I can actually set up a standalone form to maintain that. The data that I maintain in that form can then be used in an Extender window, for example, later on as a lookup. And again, we'll see some examples of that throughout this demo. Okay, so that's my slides for now. We do have some slides to come back to later on, but for now, let's go ahead and dive into the actual demo. So I'm going to shut down that. And here we are in Dynamics GP. Now, I do want to start off, I always like to start off by showing you some of what Extender can do, and then we'll show you how do I do that. Okay, so very first thing I want to do, let's take a look at our sales transaction entry. I want to talk about an Extender window. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to open up a particular order. Let's take a look at 2225, for example. Okay, here I have normal GP window, you can see here, but I actually have some subscription data that I want to track for this thing. So down here, this Soft Extras choice off of my additional, you guys won't find that in your Dynamics GP. It doesn't matter how hard you look because it doesn't exist. When I click on Soft Extras, here you can see I've got a couple of fields. I've got a drop down that my users can select from, whether the subscription is monthly or annual. I've got VIP checkbox to identify this order as a VIP subscription or not. Okay, so just some quick information that I can track, and I'm going to show you in a couple minutes how easy it is to add more fields to this window, or all of the different types of data that we could track. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, and let's go ahead and close that window. Now, I told you before that that was an Extender window because it hangs off of an existing GP window. Okay, so what I can do next is show you an Extender form. So here's my subscriptions. I can go ahead and take a look and see my subscription plan. Okay, so now I've got these plans. Notice here I've got plan ID. All these red guys, these are required fields, so I can set my fields as required. And if you look at this window, it looks exactly like every other window in Dynamics GP. I've got the same toolbar across the top. I've got my lookup buttons that work. I can select an existing one Okay, I can scroll back and forth through them. I can even sort by different fields on the window. Okay, so these windows are really meant to use for the users to interact with. Okay, now I could use this subscription plan as a lookup on another extender form or on an extender window, and now I start to build an entire application. Okay, but wait, there's more. So I've shown you an extender window. I've shown you an extender form. I've even shown you an extender menu. Okay, so this menu doesn't exist anywhere in your Dynamics GP either. I know that with certainty unless you created it using extender. Okay, next I want to show you an extender action. Okay, I'm going to go back to my trusty sales transaction entry, and I'm going to go ahead and enter a new sales order. Okay, let's choose Customer Central D. Okay, here's our central distributing. We'll throw that in the rod batch. Okay, now when I get to the PO number, I'm going to go ahead and tab out of this field. Now take a look. Your system doesn't check for existing purchase order numbers. What we've done is we've added an extender trigger, okay, or an extender action. It takes a look at that field and what I just typed, and now it's come back and looked at all of the previous sales orders for the Customer Central D, and it has said, hey, there's another sales order in our system that's using that same purchase order number. Okay, and now I'm presenting 3 choices to my end user. So they have to decide what to do. Now it could be that, you know, I'm dealing with a buyer named Paul, and Paul always uses Paul as his purchase order number, and it's perfectly acceptable that this is a duplicate because I'm only ever going to have the purchase order number Paul for this customer. So that's okay. I could press continue and move on with my day. I could say, you know what, if this is a duplicate, I trust you, Dynamics GP. I'm going to go ahead and delete this order and move on with my day as well. Or I can open up an inquiry window. I can take a look and I can say, hey, look at this. There actually is a purchase order. And if I open up this document, okay, here we are. It's sales order 2225 that I showed you guys earlier. You know, I can take a look. Here's my SOP extras. We showed you that earlier. I'm in inquiry mode, so it's not editable. Okay, so I have all of the information available to me. Now, I didn't code the sales transaction inquiry zoom. I didn't code this inquiry window. These are standard GP windows that I just pulled open using the extender action. Okay, so now with the combination of extender actions, forms, menus, windows, we can start to build an entire solution with little to no code at all. Okay. So how do we do all that? Let's take a quick look. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of these things. I don't need that sales order because it's a duplicate. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go to Extender, Tools, Extender, Extender. Okay, and let's start to take a look at some of those guys. So let's take a look at the window first. Here's our SOP extras window that we created earlier, or we saw earlier. Okay, you can see here the very first thing we do on any window is tell it what GP window we connect to. Now, just so you guys know, we can connect at the line level. If you have a window that has a scrolling grid, we can connect to the scrolling grid. An example of that I like to use quite often is I had a customer where they make the backs of garbage trucks, and they needed to paint the containers that they were making the color of the garbage truck company. Okay, rather than build a customization in GP or build a kit or anything like that, we just tied an extender window to the sales order line and said these bins are going to be red, these bins are going to be blue, and the users were able to get their jobs done real quick. Okay, so this one's tied to the transaction entry header though. If we take a look, the subscription type is a list, for example. I'm just going to double click that. You can see here, here's my list items. I could very quickly add a weekly subscription, for example, semi-monthly, if I really wanted to. Okay, I can have this list be whatever I need this list to be because I do not want to trust my users to just type in the word monthly because I'm not always going to get the word monthly. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to come out of there, checkbox, let's add a new field. Okay, so I'm going to type, let's do a, actually, let's do a vendor ID for example. So let's say that the subscription that they're looking to is to a magazine, and we buy that magazine from a particular vendor. Okay, so I can do a lookup here now. First, take a look at all these different field types. I'm not going to go through and show you every single one of them. It would be a long demo indeed if I did that, but I do want to show you a couple that are pretty cool. Okay, so we've already shown you checkbox and lists. I want to show you a lookup. Okay, now exposed to you is pretty much most of the major lookups that you're going to see in Dynamics GP. Okay, vendors, classes, things like that. Okay, now any form that I've created, any custom form that I've created as part of the solution is also available to me as a lookup on this list. Okay, but for our example, I'm choosing a vendor. So I'm going to say vendor right here. Okay, I am going to say save. Now, the reason I want to show you this is not only is there a lookup out to things in the system, this vendor, I told you we're buying a magazine from this vendor. So what is this customer actually subscribing to? Now I can look up the vendor item number. Okay, take a look at this. I have something called a linked lookup. Now, from certain lookups within Dynamics GP, you guys are probably used to, when I select a customer, I have particular customer addresses. When I select a vendor, I have particular vendor addresses or items. Those are called a linked lookup. It's a lookup that's driven by a previous lookup selection. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to choose my item number. And now what's going to happen is the user is going to be able to choose a vendor, and then they're going to be able to choose a vendor item that is from a list that is specifically restricted to vendor items associated with this vendor. Okay, I have obviously other data types up in here. I'm not going to choose them all. But one of the ones I always like to show is account. So that's GL account. I don't know how much you guys know about GP, but in the background of GP, at the database level, the account is actually only stored in one particular table in GP, and something called an account index is actually used everywhere else. So we've actually recreated that functionality for you. So you don't have to create an account lookup. We did that for you. Okay. So yeah, lots of different types here that you can play with when you get out into the world. I'm going to move on next and talk about some of the options available to you. We're going to talk about scrolling grid later, but a scrolling grid, you can actually add lines to the window that you're on to, in this case, the extender window. One good example of that I've seen a customer of mine use it for, it was a fishery. And the fishery required they were required to track the days at sea for each of the sailors within their fleet. Okay, and sailors are a fickle bunch. They tend to move around from boat to boat throughout the year, and it was difficult for them to track it outside in Excel. So what they did, they created a window on the employee record in Dynamics GP. The top portion of the extender window had all of the information related to the sailors, so whatever their sailor ID is and all that jazz. But then they had a scrolling grid below, and what they did was they would select the boat, the date on the boat, and the date off the boat every time a sailor got on or off the boat. And then at the end of the year, they could very quickly run a report that brought together all of that data, and they could hand it off to the authorities. Okay, so this was something in GP that it didn't have a correlation in GP, but we were able to track it in GP and generate all the reporting that they needed. Okay, one thing that people often ask is, I can't always trust that Betty's going to open this window, Betty being the order clerk. So, what can I do to make sure that Betty gets into this window and makes choices within the window? I can use the auto open feature, which can be linked to a field entry or exit. Or if this was a scrolling grid window that we're attaching to, we could go ahead and say line change. Okay, now what's going to happen is Betty's going to come into the PO number field, and automatically we're going to pop open a window, and it's going to remind Betty, oh yeah, I better fill in those other fields too. Okay. All right, so that's some of the options available to you. Okay, I want to talk about inquiry. So if you guys remember when we went to the SOP transaction inquiry Zoom, we could see the exact same data that we had entered on the sales order entry window. That's particularly important with transactions in GP where you're posting them, because a posted transaction you can only get to from the inquiry window. Okay, you can't get to that from the front end. So if I go ahead and click on this first line here, you can see it's very simple. I just identify, first of all, what am I going to call it? And then what is the inquiry window I need to attach it to? Sometimes you'll find that there's multiple inquiry windows where the same data could be attached, and that's totally fine. We don't restrict you to the number of inquiry windows you attach this to. In our particular case, there's only one, so we're all good. Now, you saw that I showed you it was read-only. I could turn that off. If you, for example, if you had sales transactions you needed to post right away, but there was data after the fact you need to gather, like the data was actually delivered, stuff like that, you can make this not read-only, which means the users could still edit that data even though the transaction was posted. Okay. Let's go ahead and cancel that. One other thing that you can do in this window is automatically add your data to a smart list. Okay, so in this case, you can see I'm adding it to a standard GP smart list, and I am adding it to the sales transactions smart list. So I've got a couple of fields available to me. Now I've automatically associated those with the sales transaction smart list. So now my users don't have to go back to the transaction to see that data. They can get to it through Smart List or Smart View if they happen to be a Smart View user. And that data is totally available to them. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about actions. This is different from the actions I told you before, the extender logic. So the actions here are really about actions within the screen. So as an example, I have one that I did for a customer recently where they needed to track whether or not they got back a waiver from their vendors, a signed waiver. So they wanted to know the date the waiver was received. So what we did was we just created a quick little action here where when they checked the box that said waiver received, it filled in the receipt date automatically with today's date. Okay, took no code to do that. It was a couple of mouse clicks. It took me about 3.5 minutes to get it all set up. Worked like a charm. Okay, so these are different ways that you can use these events. Okay, so that's an extender window. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, and close it up. All right, now let's take a quick look in the extender form. Let's go back to our subscriptions. I'm not going to show you the same form that I showed you earlier. I want to show you another one. This is my subscription detail form, okay? The reason I want to show you this one, I'm going to preview it because this one uses a scrolling grid, okay? So you can see here, we're tracking some subscription details, and we're going to choose subscription ID. And if you guys, oh, actually, their subscription plan is a lookup down here. If you guys remember our subscription plans, I told you could be a lookup on another form or another window. Okay, so here they are here, all those ones we set up earlier. I can go ahead and select one. Okay, whoops. And then it'll actually go through and set up some data on this form. Okay, my scrolling grid is tracking, what type of plans, what was the history of the plans down here in the grid, which I think was the code that I screwed up earlier. Okay, but scrolling grids allow you to add extra detail to any form or window with an extender. Okay, let's go ahead and clear this. Close out. So if you take a look here, again, we're setting fields as required or not required. And to set a field as required, it's super simple. There's no code required. You don't even have to go to another place to do this. You can just set required. Okay, you can also have hidden fields. So for the more developer types that might be on the call, I can create a field that's a calculation that maybe only gets used to populate another field. Okay, but I don't need the user to see that data, so I can actually have it there but hide it. Okay, and that way I can use it in other portions of the software. But I don't have to worry about cluttering the window with stuff that the users don't need to see. Okay. Again, just like before, I've got my options here, and this is how I set my scrolling grid up. It looks exactly the same as before, okay? And notice here, okay, notice because I have a currency field here, I'll look up, I can actually show totals at the bottom of my form. So it can do the sum of what were the amounts within that. Or I could make my amounts multi-currency. So I can actually have it look up my currency data within Dynamics GP. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here. The other thing I want to show you is this ability to add extra windows. Let's say I wanted to add notes to my custom form so that the users can keep track of notes. It's really simple. All I had to do is click on add. Okay, in this case, I'll take a look at the one that's here. And I have my note list. So I can have it be a single note, a list of notes, so keeping track of notes over time. Or I can have this extra window actually run a different action. Okay, so maybe update other tables within Dynamics GP, something like that. Okay, so that's our ability to add extra windows. Okay, other than that, everything here looks exactly the same way the windows did in Extender. So with that, I do want to take a quick look at the actions. Now the actions is where some code comes in, potentially, possibly. It doesn't have to. You could still have actions be low code or no code. But the one I'm going to show you actually is code-based. Okay. So let's go ahead and double click on this guy. Don't get too scared. So this one is actually running a Dynamics GP script. Okay, now we do have resources. We can help you with these Dynamics GP scripts if you need them, but this is the one that's going through and popping open all of those other GP windows I talked to you about, stuff like that. You don't have to have this be code-based though. You can create ones that are simply disabling or enabling fields. You can set or clear field values. Okay, all of these are click onlys. Okay, you don't have to write any code in this piece. Okay, I can, down here, I can open extender forms or a particular application or even another existing GP form. I can display a particular dialog, and again, there's no code here. Okay, I'm not asking you to write code for everything. I'm giving you the ability to write code when you need to. Okay, lastly, down here is the more codey types. So run macros, lots of us can record macros, so you could run a macro. You can run SQL or GP scripts. Okay, and lastly is run a shared action, which is basically a pre-coded GP action that they allow you to take advantage of. Okay, so the actions, there's a lot of ability here. Now, what I do want to show you up here is this top part. These are all the different ways we can trigger an extender action. And again, you're not restricted to extender objects in order to use as triggers. Okay, you can use any existing GP window or event. Okay, so you can actually, you could never create an extender window or form, but still take full advantage of extender actions and change the way GP works in a way that makes sense for you. Okay. So once we have all that, we're good. That's our extender actions. Now, just to remind you, extender actions are only available in our enterprise level product. We do have 2 levels, and I'll talk about the licensing and pricing when we go back to our PowerPoint presentation. But extender actions, like I just showed you, are only available in the enterprise portion. Everything else I've shown you today is available in the standard product. Okay. So I will just quickly touch on a couple other things we can do. We talked about actions, forms, and windows. We can also create menus. So if we take a look at our subscription, we've got a couple menus. So if you guys remember, when I got to my initial extender form that I showed you, I got to it by going to cards and scrolling down to a menu. This is where I'm creating those menus. Okay, and adding things to it is really simple. So I can choose another extender resource. I could go to that subscription detail form I showed you earlier. Here it is. Now, when I save it, just to prove to you how easy it is, I can come back here to cards, close that. I can come back here to cards, go to my subscriptions, and here's my subscription detail. That wasn't there earlier. Okay, so nothing up my sleeve there. It wasn't there, and I just didn't tell you. It just wasn't there. Okay. So the menus allow you to take your forms and give your users access. But more than that, they allow you to kind of control a process. So let's assume that part of my subscription maintenance is also customer maintenance. I can very quickly here add my customer maintenance window. Okay, and now my users have everything they need to do to maintain subscriptions all in one spot, all in one menu. So it's not to say that they couldn't go to the other spots where the customer maintenance can be accessed from. It's just to say that I have a process that requires these three windows, and now I have a single spot that I can go to that actually has all three of those. Okay. Alrighty. A couple other things that you can do with Extender. We can create SQL Server views, okay? So those views work a lot like our Smart List Builder products, where I can use GP tables or extra tables, and I can use the GP names for things. I don't need to understand that the SOP header table is actually SOP 10100, and the details are in SOP 10200, and it's SOP type and SOP numby that are the keys. I don't need to know any of that, okay? I can just pop open a dropdown and select my transaction table, and it's just there, and it has all of my user-friendly names on it. It's a really quick way for users to build their own SQL Server views. As I mentioned previously, those SQL Server views could then be used in Smart List Builder. They could be used in Power BI or Excel or SSRS or anywhere else the SQL Server views can be used. Okay, so those are kind of the big rocks of Extender. There's a little bit more to it, but for a quick demo, that really covers off what we needed to cover off today. So I'm going to pop back to my PowerPoint. Okay, we've taken a look at what it can do, so let's talk about some pricing. Okay, now for our standard product, I told you that is basically everything except for the Extender logic or the Extender actions. Okay, perpetual means you buy it once, $3,200, and plus there's a 20% annual maintenance fee. Okay, and then you own the product as long as you pay your annual maintenance. Okay, the other way to purchase this product is by subscription. You can see here it's $200 a month. Did I say prescription or subscription? I meant to say subscription if I didn't. So subscription would be $200 a month. You pay as you go, you cancel any time, you own it as long as you keep paying. Okay, and again, that's our standard product. Our enterprise pricing, this is everything I showed you plus the Extender actions or the Extender logic. Perpetual is $63.75 and subscription would be $385 a month. We don't have any concept of a user count, okay? So it's per GP license, basically, okay? We do have some training available. There's self-paced training, which means you learn as you want to. You get a full year of access. Okay, it's $500 per account, and I believe, again, you can use that across multiple users. We can also do private training. We don't limit the number of people that are in the training, but it is per hour. So $225 per hour for custom training that we can use to meet your needs. When it comes to support for Extender, we do offer unlimited support. It's $1,000 a year. Okay, this would include just the Extender support. If you need additional training, so support is really meant to cover just support, break fix type support. If you needed training or if you wanted us to help you with projects, then it fits into our hourly rate. So we do sell it into our blocks, and that would be $225 per hour.